The first time I saw Mara Whitfield cry, she was standing in the snow with a tire iron in her hand, wearing one red mitten and one bare hand, like she had left the house too fast to remember she was supposed to be cold. It was a little after 10 on a Thursday night, the kind of February cold that made the streetlights look lonely. I had just come home from a 12-hour shift at the city water department, where I worked as a field supervisor, which is a fancy way of saying I spent my days telling frozen pipes and angry homeowners that both of us needed to calm down. My name is Nathan Brooks. I was 34, divorced, and very good at keeping my life quiet. Too good, probably. I lived in the last duplex on Hawthorne Lane, the one with the crooked mailbox and the porch light I kept meaning to fix. Mara lived next door in the other half, behind pale blue curtains and a wreath she never took down after Christmas. She was 32, a freelance illustrator, and a widow. That was the first thing people mentioned about her, always in a soft voice, like the word itself might bruise her. I tried not to do that. To me, she was the woman who grew basil in chipped coffee mugs on her windowsill, the woman who hummed old Motown songs when she shoveled her walk, the woman who had once caught me burning grilled cheese at midnight and said through the open kitchen window, "That sandwich died with unfinished business." I had liked her immediately. I had also decided, with the discipline of a man who enjoyed making himself miserable, that liking her was a terrible idea, because she still wore her wedding ring on a chain around her neck. And I still had the kind of divorce papers that taught a man not to mistake loneliness for love. So when I saw her outside that night, half lit by the falling snow, kneeling beside her little white Subaru with the hazards blinking, I told myself I was just being neighborly. Not interested. Not worried in that particular way a man gets worried when the woman he notices too much is out alone in a storm. Neighborly. I parked in my driveway, killed the engine, and stepped out into a wind sharp enough to make me regret every life choice since breakfast. "Mara?" She jumped, then turned, wiping at her face too quickly. "Oh, Nathan, hi." "Hi?" I looked from her face to the flat tire. "That's the word you're going with?" She gave me a shaky little smile. I was considering everything is fine, but even I have limits. The snow had gathered in her dark hair and on the shoulders of her gray wool coat. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, but her eyes were red for another reason. I walked over slowly, hands visible, like she was a skittish animal and I was trying not to scare her. "You got a spare?" "Yes." "Jack?" "Yes." "Any idea how to use either?" She looked down at the tire iron in her hand. I was hoping if I held this with enough confidence, the tire would feel threatened and fix itself. I laughed before I could stop myself. She did too, but it broke halfway through. That got me. Not the tire, not the snow. That little fracture in her laugh. I crouched beside the wheel. "Pop the trunk. I'll take care of it." "You don't have to." "I know. I mean it. It's freezing." "Mara, I work water mains in February. This is practically a spa treatment." She sniffed, then gave me a look. "You have a terrible understanding of spas. And you have one mitten, so maybe neither of us is at our best." That earned a real smile. Small, but real. She opened the trunk. I pulled out the spare and the jack while she hovered beside me, switching her bare hand into her coat pocket and pretending not to shiver. I wanted to tell her to go inside, but something about the way she stood there made it clear she didn't want to be alone just yet. So I didn't send her away. I loosened the lug nuts while she held my flashlight. The beam shook a little. "You okay?" I asked. "Sure." "Mara." She sighed, and the flashlight beam settled on my hands. "Today was our anniversary." I stopped turning the wrench. The snow kept falling, soft and indifferent. "I'm sorry," I said. She nodded once, like she had accepted that sentence from 100 people and never found a place to put it. "I thought I'd be fine. I worked all day, made soup, watched half a movie. Then I realized I was out of tea, which is apparently the thing that broke me. Not the grief, not the memories. Chamomile." Her voice had that brittle edge people get when they're trying not to fall apart in front of someone. I kept my eyes on the tire because sometimes looking directly at pain makes people feel exposed. Chamomile has ruined stronger people. She let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "I drove to the store," she said. Sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes. Didn't go in. Then came home and hit something under the snow. Now here we are. I glanced up. For what it's worth, I'm glad you came home. Her eyes met mine. It was a simple thing to say. Too simple, maybe. But it changed the air between us. For a second, there was no wind, no traffic, no blinking hazards. Just Mara looking at me like she'd heard something underneath the words. Then she looked away first. Thank you, she said quietly. I finished changing the tire with my fingers half numb and my knees wet from the slush. When I stood, she reached out and brushed snow off the sleeve of my jacket without thinking. It was nothing. It was everything. Her hand lingered for half a second near my forearm, then dropped. You're freezing, she said. I've been worse. That's not the reassuring answer you think it is. I loaded the flat into her trunk and slammed it shut. Drive slow on the spare. Get the tire replaced tomorrow. And maybe don't go out for tea in a blizzard. She tilted her head. Is that your official government advice? City Water Department. We're known for emotional wisdom. Really? Because I once called about brown tap water and a man named Doug told me to wait and see if it got less weird. That was our senior philosopher. She laughed again, and this time it stayed whole. Then we stood there in the snow between our two houses, the awkward part arriving right on schedule. The part where I should have said goodnight and walked away like a sensible man. But Mara wrapped both arms around herself and looked toward her porch, where the yellow light made the falling snow glow. Then she looked back at me. Her wedding ring, hanging on that thin chain, caught the light at her throat. I made soup, she said. I swallowed. You mentioned. And tea, technically, just not the kind I wanted. That sounds like a crisis. It is. Her mouth curved, but her eyes were careful. You helped me. You're soaked. At least come warm up inside. There it was. The invitation was innocent enough for any neighbor, but her voice wasn't casual. And the way she looked at me made my chest tighten with the dangerous hope I had been trying to ignore for months. I should have said no. Instead, I heard myself ask, are you asking because I'm cold or because you don't want to be alone? Mara's smile faded. For one long second, I thought I had ruined it. Then she stepped closer, close enough that I could smell snow and vanilla on her coat, and said, Tonight. Both. I followed Mara inside with snow melting off my boots and common sense melting even faster. Her half of the duplex was warm in a way mine had never been. Mine had furniture, hers had a home. There were watercolor sketches pinned above a small desk, books stacked in uneven towers, a knitted blanket over the couch, and a fat orange cat sitting on the windowsill like he owned property and had opinions about trespassers. That's Winston, Mara said, hanging her coat by the door. He's judgmental but food-motivated. Winston stared at me. I respect that, I said. Mara smiled over her shoulder and I forgot for a second that I was standing in wet socks and a winter jacket. She had taken off her coat. Underneath she wore a soft green sweater with sleeves too long for her hands. Her hair, dark and damp from the snow, curled near her jaw. She looked tired and sad and beautiful in a way that made me want to be careful with every word I said. Shoes off? I asked. Please, unless you want Winston to file a complaint. I unlaced my boots by the door. When I straightened, she was holding out a towel. For your hair, she said. I rubbed it over my head. How bad is it? Like a handsome raccoon who lost a fight with a snowbank. I paused. Her cheeks colored immediately. I said raccoon. You also said handsome. I was being charitable. No, too late. I'm taking the win. She turned toward the kitchen, but I caught her smile before she hit it. The kitchen smelled like tomatoes, garlic, and something earthy simmering low. She ladled soup into 2 bowls and put a kettle on. I stood there feeling too large for the room, too aware of the quiet between us. Sit, she said, pointing at the small table by the window. You look like you're waiting to be assigned a task. I'm good with tasks. I've noticed. She set a bowl in front of me. Our fingers brushed when she handed me a spoon. Just a light contact, barely anything. But she inhaled like she'd felt it too. I looked down at the soup. Very fascinating soup. We ate while the snow thickened against the glass. For a while, we talked about safe things, work, her illustration deadlines, Winston's crimes, the elderly man across the street who shoveled everyone's sidewalks at dawn and refused baked goods as payment because, according to him, muffins are how they get you. Then Mara stirred her soup and said, I'm not usually like this. Like what? Inviting men in because they changed a tire. I assumed there was a rigorous application process. There is, you pass the snow portion. What are the other portions? She leaned back, considering me. Must not be cruel to waiters, must know the difference between listening and waiting to talk. Must have at least one deeply embarrassing favorite song. That last one is invasive. Answer the question, Nathan. I pointed my spoon at her. If I tell you, you're legally required to tell me yours. Fine. Dancing Queen. ABBA. Her face lit with delight. That's not embarrassing, that's excellent. It is when you're 6'2" and singing it alone in a city truck at 7 in the morning. She laughed, covering her mouth with her sweater sleeve, and the sound did something dangerous to me. It made the room feel smaller. It made the grief at the edges of her eyes seem less like a wall and more like a window cracked open. Your turn, I said. She winced. The theme song from an 80s cartoon called Gem? I blinked. I don't know what that is. Then I still have dignity. For now? Her smile softened, and for a moment we just looked at each other. The kind of looking that wasn't accidental anymore. Then her gaze dipped to my mouth. I felt it like a hand on my chest. Mara stood quickly. Tea. Right. She reached for 2 mugs in the cabinet, and the sleeve of her sweater slid up, revealing the thin chain at her throat and the ring resting against the green wool. The mood shifted before either of us spoke. She noticed me noticing. My husband's name was Daniel, she said quietly. I nodded. You don't have to explain. I know. She held the mugs close to her chest. But I want to. So I stayed still. She poured hot water over tea bags and stared at the steam. He was kind, funny, terrible at keeping plants alive. He died 2 years ago next month. Aneurysm, no warning. One minute we were arguing about where to order pizza, and the next, she pressed her lips together. The next, my life had a before and after. I'm sorry, I said again, because there still wasn't a better sentence. She nodded, but this time it seemed to land. I loved him, she said. I believe you. And sometimes I feel like if I ever want anything else, it means I loved him less. My throat tightened. I could have said something comforting, something polished. Instead, I told her the truth. My marriage ended because my ex-wife and I were lonely together, and neither of us had the courage to admit it for years. After the divorce, I kept thinking wanting someone again would mean I hadn't learned my lesson. I looked at Mara. Maybe wanting isn't the betrayal. Maybe pretending we don't want is. She held my gaze. Steam curled between us. That sounds like senior philosopher Doug talking, she whispered. I smiled. Doug has layers. Mara laughed softly, then set the mugs down. She came back to the table but didn't sit. Instead, she stood beside my chair, close enough that the hem of her sweater brushed my arm. Nathan. I looked up. Her eyes were bright, but not from tears now. I didn't invite you in only because I was cold and sad. My heart gave one hard knock. No? No. She swallowed. I invited you because when you're outside, I look out the window longer than I need to. Because I know the sound of your truck. Because you pretend not to check on me when the weather's bad, and I pretend not to notice. I couldn't move. If I moved, I might reach for her. And if I reached for her, I wasn't sure I'd stop at neighborly. Mara, I said, rougher than I meant. I'm not asking for promises. Her voice trembled, but she didn't look away. I'm not even sure what I'm ready for. I just wanted one honest thing tonight. I stood slowly. Now we were too close. Her chin tilted up. My hands ached with the restraint of not touching her. Here's mine, I said. I've wanted to kiss you since the grilled cheese comment. Her lips parted. That was months ago. I'm patient. You're stubborn. That too. She smiled, but it faded into something softer. Ask me. I understood, not because she was fragile, because she deserved to choose. Can I kiss you, Mara? Her answer was barely more than breath. Yes. I touched her cheek first, giving her time to change her mind. She didn't. She leaned into my palm like she was tired of holding herself upright alone. Then I kissed her. It was gentle, careful. A kiss that knew there were ghosts in the room and didn't try to chase them out. Her hands came to my chest, fingers curling in my shirt, and for one suspended second, she kissed me back like she had been waiting in the snow much longer than tonight. When we broke apart, her forehead rested against mine. Winston meowed loudly from the window. Mara laughed against my mouth. He disapproves. He's jealous. He has standards. I'll win him over. Her fingers stayed at my chest. You think you'll be around enough to try? There it was again. A door opening, not wide, but open. I brushed my thumb along her cheek. If you want me to be. She closed her eyes, then nodded once. I do. I didn't stay the night. Not because I didn't want to. Want was sitting very much awake in my chest when I stepped back from Mara and saw her lips still soft from mine, her fingers still holding my shirt like she'd forgotten how to let go. But there are moments you don't take. You honor them by not rushing to the next thing. So I kissed her forehead, drank half a mug of tea while Winston judged my character from beneath the table, and left before midnight with my damp boots in one hand and my self-control hanging by a thread. At my own door, I looked back. Mara stood in her window, one hand raised, sweater sleeve covering her fingers. I lifted my hand too. Then she smiled. And just like that, Hawthorne Lane didn't feel quite so frozen. The next morning, I woke to 3 inches of new snow and a text from an unknown number. This is Mara. I stole your number from the neighborhood emergency list. Please don't report me to the authorities. I sat up in bed, grinning like an idiot. Depends. Is this a ransom situation? A second later. Yes, I have your dignity. It was last seen singing ABBA in a city truck. I laughed so hard I scared myself. We texted through breakfast. Nothing dramatic. Nothing heavy. Just little pieces of ordinary life being handed back and forth like kindling. She sent a photo of Winston sitting inside a cardboard box. Mara. He has accepted the box as tribute. You remain under review. Me? Tell him I can provide references. Mara. Are any of them cats? Me? No, but Doug at work once called me not the worst. Mara. Strong endorsement. By noon, the roads were clear enough for me to run her ruined tire to the shop. When I knocked on her door, she opened it before my knuckles hit wood. I wasn't waiting, she said immediately. Of course not. I was near the door for unrelated reasons. In your coat? She looked down at herself. Coincidence. And boots? A fashion choice. And purse? She narrowed her eyes. You're enjoying this too much. I've had a good morning. Her expression softened in a way that went straight through me. Me too, she said. The tire shop was backed up, so we left the Subaru there and walked to the diner 2 blocks over. It wasn't a date, technically. Nobody said date. But when Mara slid into the booth across from me and unwrapped her scarf with pink cheeks and bright eyes, it felt like one. The kind of date where both people are afraid to call it that because naming a thing gives it weight. The waitress poured coffee. Mara ordered pancakes. I ordered eggs. Then she stole a piece of my toast without asking. I stared at her. What? She said, buttering it. That was my toast. You had 2. I was emotionally attached to both. You'll recover. You're very bold for a woman whose tire is being held hostage. She took a bite and smiled around it. And yet here you are. She had me there. The diner windows had fogged at the edges, turning the world outside into a blur of snowbanks and passing headlights. Inside, there was the clatter of plates, the smell of coffee, the warmth of her foot accidentally brushing mine under the table. Then, not accidentally. Mara's boot rested lightly against mine. I looked up. She was watching me over the rim of her mug, trying to look innocent and failing beautifully. You okay? I asked. Her smile dimmed but didn't disappear. I keep waiting to feel guilty. For breakfast. For this. She looked between us, for enjoying myself. I set my coffee down. And do you? A little. She rubbed her thumb along the mug handle, but not the way I expected. It's more like I'm standing in two rooms at once, one where I miss him, one where I'm sitting here with you, wanting you to look at me like that again. My chest tightened. Like what? Her cheeks warmed. Like I'm not a broken thing you're trying to fix. I reached across the table, palm up. She looked at my hand for a moment, then placed hers in it. You're not broken, I said. You're grieving. There's a difference. Her fingers curled around mine. And I'm not here to fix you, I added. I'm here because I like you. Because you make terrible soup invitations in snowstorms. Because you insult my sandwiches and steal my toast. Because when you smile, I forget what I was worried about. Her eyes shone. That's a lot of reasons. I've been collecting them. A laugh escaped her, small and wet. You're dangerous, Nathan Brooks. I changed a tire. Let's not exaggerate. No. She squeezed my hand. You're patient. That's worse. I brushed my thumb over her knuckles, careful and not careful at all. Tell me if I go too fast. Tell me if I go too slow. That surprised me. She lifted her chin, a little challenge in her eyes now. Don't look so shocked. I'm grieving, not dead. The waitress arrived with our food at exactly the wrong moment and exactly the right one. We pulled our hands apart like teenagers caught in a library, and Mara laughed into her napkin. After breakfast, the tire still wasn't ready, so we walked back slowly. Snow crunched under our boots. At the corner, an older woman from our street, Mrs. Alvarez, paused with her grocery bag and looked from Mara to me to the very small space between our shoulders. Well, she said, smiling too knowingly. Good morning. Mara stiffened. I felt it immediately. Morning, I said, easy as I could. Mrs. Alvarez moved on, but the damage had already passed through Mara's face. Not shame exactly, fear. I stopped near a bare maple tree. Hey, she kept looking down the street. People will talk. Probably. They'll think it's too soon. Some will. They liked Daniel. I'm sure they did. Her eyes flashed to mine. That doesn't make this simple. I didn't say it did. Then why are you so calm? Because I'm not asking the neighborhood for permission to care about you. The wind lifted a strand of hair across her cheek. I brushed it back before I could overthink it. She went still. I let my hand fall. Sorry. Don't be. Her voice softened. Do it again. So I did. This time my hand lingered at her jaw. She looked up at me with snowflakes caught in her lashes, brave and uncertain and wanting. I'm scared, she whispered. Me too. You don't look scared. I'm better at hiding it. What are you scared of? That I'll want more than you can give. Her breath caught. Then she stepped closer, closing that little, careful distance between us. Maybe I'm scared I can give more than I thought. I couldn't help myself. Is this where I make a toast joke to reduce the tension? If you do, I'll kiss you just to shut you up. I smiled, and that my toast was very important to me. Mara rose onto her toes and kissed me. Not like the night before. This one was warmer, surer. Her gloved hands gripped the front of my jacket, and mine settled at her waist. Right there on the sidewalk, in the gray afternoon, with neighbors and grief and old ghosts all existing around us, Mara chose me for 3 full heartbeats. When she pulled back, her smile was trembling. That was blackmail, she said. I feel used. You liked it. I did. She laughed, and the sound followed us all the way back to the tire shop, where she took my hand before we reached the door. Not hidden, not announced, just held. And for that day, it was enough. For 2 weeks, Mara and I became experts at almost dating. We had coffee on our shared porch before work, both of us pretending we had stepped outside by coincidence. I fixed her loose kitchen cabinet hinge. She repaid me with lemon muffins and a lecture about accepting kindness without itemized invoices. We walked to the mailbox together like it was a scenic route through Paris instead of 12 steps past frozen hedges. And we kissed. Not constantly, not carelessly, but enough that I started to learn things. Mara made a small sound in the back of her throat when I kissed the corner of her mouth. She always touched my wrist first, as if asking herself permission. She liked when I backed her gently against her front door, but only if I smiled afterward because seriousness still scared her when it came too close to desire. I learned to smile. One Friday evening, she invited me over for what she called a completely normal dinner between neighbors who have kissed in public. That's a terrible event title, I said, standing in her kitchen while she chopped onions. I'm working on it. Try date. Shorter, easier to spell. Her knife paused. I leaned against the counter, suddenly aware I'd said it too casually. Mara looked over at me. Is that what this is? I held her gaze. I'd like it to be. The onion sat forgotten between us. Then she smiled, slow and shy and bright enough to undo me. Then yes, it's a date. I stepped closer. Good. You look very pleased with yourself. I'm trying to be humble. You're failing. I'm on a date with the woman who once called my grilled cheese a tragedy. Humility isn't possible. She laughed, and I kissed her because I could. Because she tilted her face up like she wanted me to. Because her hands came to my chest and stayed there, warm through my shirt. The kiss started soft and turned hungry enough that the knife on the cutting board became a safety concern. Mara broke away first, breathless. The onions are watching. I don't care. You will when dinner tastes like neglect. I pressed one more kiss to her forehead and stepped back. Fine, feed me. Bossy. Hopeful. She turned back to the cutting board, smiling to herself. Dinner was pasta with roasted vegetables, bread from the bakery, and red wine she claimed she bought because the label had a fox wearing glasses. That's how adults choose wine, she said. I thought adults chose wine by pretending to understand regions. I refused to be bullied by grapes. We ate at her small table while Winston sat in the empty chair and stared at me with moderate hostility. Halfway through the meal, Mara reached under the table and linked her foot with mine. The gesture was so simple it nearly hurt. After dinner, she put on music. Old Motown low through a little speaker on the shelf. I started clearing plates, but she took them from my hands. No tasks, she said. Date rules. I'm unfamiliar with your bylaws. Then learn. She held out a hand. I stared at it. You want to dance? No, Nathan. I want to compare palm sizes dramatically. I'm not much of a dancer. I assumed, Abba man. That was private. Not anymore. So I took her hand. We danced in her kitchen, between the table and the stove, barely moving at first. Her hand rested on my shoulder. Mine settled at her waist. The music was warm, the room dim except for the light over the sink, and Mara's body fit against mine, with a familiarity that felt impossible after only 2 weeks. She rested her cheek against my chest. I stopped trying to count steps. You're better than you said, she murmured. I'm standing still. Exactly, very stable. I smiled into her hair. High praise. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then her fingers tightened at the back of my neck. Daniel and I used to dance in the kitchen. The name landed gently, but it landed. I kept my arm around her. Do you want to stop? She lifted her head. Her eyes were wet but steady. No, that's what surprises me. Yeah? I thought memories were rooms you had to leave before entering new ones. She looked at our joined hands. But maybe they can share walls. I swallowed around something thick. I don't need you to make space for me by erasing him, I said. Her face changed, opened. You really mean that? I do. She reached up and touched my jaw, thumb brushing over stubble. That might be the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. I was hoping for something smoother. No. She smiled through tears. Smooth is overrated. Then she kissed me. This kiss was not careful. It was Mara rising into me with both hands at my face, choosing the present without apologizing to the past. I held her by the waist and felt her tremble, felt the exact moment she stopped holding back quite so much. When we parted, she stayed close, her lips brushing mine as she whispered, Stay a little longer tonight. My heart kicked. I can do that. Not because I'm sad. I know. Because I want you here. I nodded, forehead touching hers. Then I'm here. We moved to the couch with mugs of tea neither of us really drank. Mara tucked herself against my side, her legs curled beneath her, and I put my arm around her. Winston eventually jumped up and, after glaring at me, settled against my thigh. I think I've been accepted, I whispered. Don't get cocky. He likes warm furniture. I kissed the top of her head. I'll take it. She traced idle patterns over my palm. Can I ask you something? Anything. After your divorce, did you feel embarrassed? The question surprised me. All the time. She lifted her head. I felt like everyone could see I'd failed at the thing I was supposed to know how to do, I said. Marriage, love, being enough. I hated running into people who asked how I was in that careful voice. I know that voice. I figured. She threaded her fingers through mine. You were enough, Nathan. The words were quiet, but they hit hard. I looked at her. She looked nervous after saying it, like she had stepped farther than planned. So I chose her again. Not with a tire iron or a repair or some useful task. With the truth. I'm falling for you, I said. Mara went still. The silence stretched so long I heard the radiator tick. Then she sat up, turned fully toward me, and took both my hands. I'm not ready to say that back. My chest tightened, but I nodded. Okay. But I want to be. Her eyes filled. And that scares me more than not wanting it. I brought her hands to my mouth and kissed her knuckles. I can wait. She let out a shaky breath. Don't wait like a martyr. I'm terrible at martyrdom. Good. Her thumb brushed my lower lip. Wait like a man who knows I'm coming toward him. I smiled against her hand. I can do that. She leaned in and kissed me slowly, deeply, until the ache in my chest became something warmer. Later, at the door, she stood barefoot on the rug, arms wrapped around herself. I put on my coat reluctantly. Date rules say goodnight? Unfortunately. Can I file an appeal? Denied. Harsh. She smiled and then caught my sleeve before I turned. Nathan. Yeah, I had a good date. Me too. No, she said, stepping closer. I mean, I didn't survive it. I enjoyed it. I understood the difference. I cupped her cheek. Then we'll have another. Her smile was answer enough. And when she kissed me goodnight, she didn't look guilty afterward. She looked happy. That was when I knew I was in real trouble. The trouble with happiness when you've lived without it for a while is that you keep checking it for cracks. Mara did. So did I. There were days she reached for me easily, kissing me on the porch with coffee in her hand, laughing when I complained that Winston had started sleeping on my clean laundry. And there were days she went quiet. On those days, I learned not to panic, not to make her sadness about me. Sometimes she needed to talk about Daniel. Sometimes she needed to sit beside me without explaining anything. Sometimes she needed me to go home, and the first time she asked, I saw how hard it was for her to say. So I kissed her hand and said, Okay, text me when you want. Her eyes filled. You're not upset? I'm disappointed, I admitted, but not upset. That's very emotionally mature of you. I'm furious about it. She laughed, and the fear between us loosened. The next morning, she showed up at my door with cinnamon rolls from the bakery and snow in her hair. I missed you, she said, before I could even tease her. I pulled her inside by the sleeve of her coat. Good. Good? I like being missed. That's smug. That's honest. She set the bakery box on my table and stepped into me, her cold hands sliding beneath my sweater at my waist. I hissed. You are made of ice. Warm me up then. I forgot all about the cinnamon rolls. Spring came slowly that year. The snowbanks shrank into gray islands. The gutters dripped. Mara's basil returned to the windowsill stubborn and green. We spent Sunday mornings walking to the diner where she still stole my toast and I still pretended to be wounded. One afternoon in April, she asked if I would go with her to the cemetery. I said yes, then let her decide everything else. The cemetery sat on a hill outside town, bare trees just beginning to bud. Mara carried yellow tulips. I walked beside her close enough that our hands brushed, but I didn't take hers until she reached for me first. Daniel's headstone was simple: beloved husband, son, friend. Mara stood in front of it for a long time. Then she said, "Hi." The wind moved through the grass. I looked away, giving her privacy, but she squeezed my hand. "Stay," she whispered. So I stayed. She told him about the winter, about Winston, about her work, about how she had made soup on their anniversary and cried over tea. Then she looked at me, nervous and brave. "And this is Nathan," she said softly. "He changed my tire. He's terrible at accepting compliments. He dances like a cautious refrigerator." "Accurate," I murmured. Mara smiled through tears. Then her thumb moved over mine. "I think you'd like him," she said to the stone. "And I think I'm allowed to love him." My breath caught. She turned to me fully then, tulips bright in one hand, grief and sunlight all over her face. "I do," she said. I couldn't speak. She laughed once, shaky. "This is the part where you say something." I stepped closer. "I love you, Mara Whitfield." Her tears spilled, but she was smiling now. "I love you too, Nathan Brooks." I kissed her there on the hill, gently with the tulips between us and the past at our feet. Didn't feel like leaving anyone behind. It felt like being blessed by every road that had brought us there, even the broken ones. 6 months after that snowy night, Mara moved the wreath from her door to mine because, according to her, your porch has no personality and needs supervision. A year after that night, the duplex stopped feeling like two separate homes. We didn't rush into selling or buying or making grand announcements. We just lived closer and closer until the line between our places became more of a suggestion. Her books appeared on my shelves. My work boots ended up by her back door. Winston defected completely and started sleeping on my chest like a furry orange tyrant. On the first snow of the next winter, Mara and I stood in the driveway where it had all started. The streetlights glowed. The air smelled clean and cold. Snow gathered in her hair just like before, but this time there were no tears on her face. "You know," she said, looking at her Subaru, "I should probably learn how to change a tire." "I can teach you. Will you be patient?" "No." She bumped my shoulder. "Liar." I turned toward her. "I'll be very patient, annoyingly patient. You'll beg me to be less patient." "That sounds like you. And afterward, you'll invite me in for soup." She smiled. "At least to warm up." I caught her gloved hand and pulled her closer. "Is that the only reason?" Mara stepped into my arms, her face tilted up, eyes bright with everything we had survived and everything we were still building. "No," she said. "Not even close." I kissed her while the snow came down around us, slow and silver, covering the old tire tracks in the drive. Inside, the porch light burned warm. Winston watched from the window. And Mara's ring, the one she still wore sometimes on its chain, rested beside the new one on her finger, both of them shining in the winter dark. What would you have done if you helped your widowed neighbor on a snowy night and she invited you inside to warm up? Have you ever experienced something similar where one small act of kindness turned into something more? Tell your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.